This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Hello, America. Welcome to tonight's program on The Blaze. I'm David Barton, filling in for Glenn. Common Core. You've heard about it? And over the coming months, it'll be in the news even more as new parts of it continue to unfold. Common Core is not something that's going away, even though it sure needs to. But because it's still a work in progress, today we're going to look and cover some of the new problems that have emerged since we covered this topic 3 months ago. So let me begin by first acknowledging what we as constitutional conservatives know and believe. Our kids are one of America's most precious resources. Like snowflakes, God made each and every one of them unique. They all have different personalities, they all have different strengths and different interests and different skill sets. But our government education system today insists on treating them as if they're all just the same, trying to cram every one of them into a government-shaped and government-defined mold. And that's one of the underlying problems with Common Core. They want to make everybody look and think the same. Now, it's definitely true that there are certain minimum amounts of academic knowledge that every student needs in order to be a good citizen, but kids aren't even getting this academic knowledge at school today. And one of the biggest selling points from Common Core proponents is their claim of increased academic rigor in their standards. Yeah, maybe, but recent evidence sure seems to suggest otherwise. Look at this article. Notice this. Students in Kentucky were the first to undergo the Common Core's testing regimen. The state adopted the standards in 2010. 1 year later, its students' scores fell across the board by roughly a third in reading and math. And look at this headline. First empirical evidence, Common Core hurts Kentucky students. Now, there's also been other stories like this from other states, and so, yeah, maybe that's academic rigor, maybe it's not. But for anybody who truly is concerned about academic rigor, I suggest that you look backward. Did you know that until the early part of the 20th century, American kids finished school at 8th grade? That's as far as they went, not the 12 grades we have today. So talking about academic rigor, try answering a few exit questions from an 8th grade graduation test, and this is from Kansas in 1895, okay? Easy stuff, 8th grade. Grammar, number 1, give 9 rules for the use of capital letters. Anybody want to take a shot at that? Look at this one. Here's, name the parts of speech and define those that have no modifications. That's 8th grade in 1895. Well, let's move on from grammar. Let's move down to something like arithmetic. District number 33 has a valuation of $35,000. What is the necessary levy to carry on a school 7 months at $50 per month and still have $105 left over for incidentals? 8th grade math. Try this one. Find a bank discount on $300 for 90 days, no grace, at 10%. That's 8th grade math. Let's move from math and let's go on over to orthography. And orthography means, it means spelling and composition is what we would call it, spelling and writing. What's meant by the following terms? Alphabet, phonetic, orthography, etymology, syllabification. Next question. What are the following and give examples of each? Trigraph, subvocals, diphthong, cognate letters, and lingual. Again, 8th grade. Let's go over to geography and look at some questions in geography. Name all the republics of Europe and give the capital of each. What are you going to bet most folks can't even name the states of the United States and their capitals, but now we're doing the republics of Europe and all their capitals? And look at this geography question. Why is the Atlantic coast colder than the Pacific coast at the same latitude? You couldn't get out of 8th grade unless you could handle this. Now, this is academic rigor. I think we all agree that this constitutes academic rigor, and this is in 1895 without the benefit of calculators or computers. You see, back then, kids were actually required to use their brain. But in case you find these 8th grade questions to be a bit too hard, let's back up a bit more and try some 4th grade questions from 1862. Now, here's a 4th grade. Notice this. This is in Chicago, 1862. You have 35 minutes for this test, 4th grade geography. Here's 4th grade questions. How many degrees of longitude are there? How many degrees wide are the temperate zones? Name the principal animals of the frigid zone. Look at this one. What portion of the people in the globe are pagans? What portion Christians? That's 4th grade stuff. You see, this old stuff represents true academic rigor. Education today is moving further and further away from it, and Common Core certainly seems to be contributing. And maybe part of the problem is the new teaching methods that are associated with teaching Common Core. Look at this clip from M.J. McDermott, a local television personality in Washington State. She's going to explain one of the crazy new ways that math is being taught there. Watch this.
Another popular algorithm taught in everyday math is the lattice method. Same problem, 26 times 31. This time we have to set up a lattice. It works like this. We put the 26 on top and the 31 along the side like that. And then we draw these diagonals. And then we do 1 times 6 and fill it in like that, 0, 6. 3 times 6, 18. 1 times 2, no effort to say 1 times 20, by the way, 0, 2. And 3 times 2, 0, 6. Now we add it up along the diagonal. 6, 8, 0 plus 2 is 10. Carry the 1. 6, 7, 8, and 0 is 8, and a 0 there. And the answer is read this way. There's your answer, 806. It's kind of fun. It works every time. But even the authors of Everyday Math admit in their teacher's manual why the lattice method works is not immediately obvious, but it is very efficient and powerful. The principal disadvantages of the algorithm are that it is unfamiliar to many adults, i.e. parents, and making the lattice takes time.
Okay, so teaching this new lattice method of working problems is going to help student knowledge? I don't think so. But you see, this is one of the fundamental problems with progressives. It doesn't matter how well something is already working or how long it's been working well. They're always wanting change. They're always wanting to move forward or lean forward. And they want to leave the old things behind. You see, progressives are all about progress after all. They want to implement the new, even if the old works well and the new doesn't. And did you notice that MJ pointed out that parents will not know the lattice method? So parents won't even be able to help their own kids with math. And this is also part of what progressives do. They want everyone dependent on them. They want the kids to rely on government officials for their knowledge and help, not on their parents. But let's not stop with just using new and impossible teaching methods. Let's look at this clip from a recent educational conference and notice a statement that kids getting the right answer is not necessarily the overall objective of progressive math education. Watch this.
Even under the new Common Core, even if they said 3 times 4 was 11, if they were able to explain their reasoning and explain how they came up with their answer really in words and in oral explanations, and they showed it in the picture, but they just got the final number wrong, we're really more focusing on the how.
The right answer doesn't really matter, just how you got it? Okay, now I understand. Maybe she was trying to say that it was important for kids to know why things worked. That is, to know the process behind getting the right answer. And that's fine. All right, I buy that. But to say that in education under Common Core we're not going to focus on getting right answers? How about getting right answers and getting the process? You see, maybe this is why test scores dropped in Kentucky. Who knows? But in addition to all of these immediate problems, Common Core also presents serious problems for the future of the Republic. Watch this.
Common Core. Maybe you've heard of it. It's the new national educational initiative that not only weakens local and state controls of education, but also fundamentally changes what students will learn. For example, under Common Core, cursive handwriting will no longer be taught. But that sounds reasonable. After all, kids send text, Facebook, and email messages to each other, so who needs cursive writing? But this means that students will no longer be able to read the journals of George Washington, or the letters of John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, or James Madison, or for that matter, even the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, which are written in cursive. In fact, students won't even be able to read the letters that their own grandparents or great-grandparents may have written and saved for their family's heritage. Under Common Core, cursive writing will become a language as foreign to students as ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Removing a student's ability to directly study American historical documents is just one of the many reasons why Common Core is bad for students, bad for states, and bad for America. Contact your legislators and let them know that you oppose Common Core.
I tell you, it's not a good thing not to be able to read early American documents for yourself. In fact, let me tell you how I first got involved in history some years ago. I was a school principal, and I read some really old documents that I'd been taught about in school. But when I read those actual documents for myself, I found that those documents were dramatically different from what my teachers and textbooks had taught me about those documents. That's when we started collecting documents. And now we have more than 100,000 originals or copies of originals from before 1812. Every student should be able to read America's founding documents for themselves, but that becomes much harder with Common Core. And in addition to the lack of academic rigor in Common Core, the dumb teaching methods used, and severing us from the ability to check our own history, there's also the data mining part of Common Core. Remember this article from TheBlaze? Indoctrination, data mining, and Common Core. Here's why America's schools may be in more trouble than you think. And remember this article? American Thinker. There seems to be little recognition yet that the Common Core gives schools and third parties unprecedented access to students' personal information. The federal government is acquiring a massive amount of data that can be sold to the highest bidders. So, they'll take our private data? Well, that really shouldn't worry anyone. I mean, we trust the government to do the right thing with all that data they're going to collect from our kids about us. And if you want proof they'll do the right thing? That's easy. Just think of how well the NSA and the IRS have protected and respected our personal data. I mean, so what's the worry? Okay, so maybe there is some history of the government agencies abusing our personal data. But remember, this data collected about us from our kids can be sold to private groups. And what's so bad about that? All you have to do is listen to what David Coleman has to say, and you can immediately see the problems and the dangers. David Coleman is the president of the College Board, and they're the ones who produce the SAT test for college-bound students. Time magazine calls him, quote, the architect in education, because, as they explain, his quiet work behind the scenes on the proposed Common Core standards makes him among the most influential figures in American education today. So David Coleman, who definitely strongly supports Common Core, is going to give us an example of how private information can be used in sophisticated ways to advance progressive causes. Listen to this clip of him at a New York educational conference.
Let's remember who really won the election. Shall we call it Nate Silver? Against all the blowhards of political commentary, the predictions of the nerds were decisive. But perhaps more exciting than the person who stood to the side and handicapped the election is the person who led the Obama campaign's use of data to galvanize a generation of low-income people to vote like they had never had before. Whether you are Republican or Democrat, the simple precision and excellence of the use of information to achieve a result is something in my mind that deserves astonishment. It means, again, that there is no force greater. Think about it. Think about it. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent on this campaign. And what made the difference, right? A lot of things. But this incredible precision and insight gained from data, not only knowing where people are, but testing various interventions, seeing what works, keeping focused on delivering them.
That's not how I want my private information used. And I don't care whether it's for the Obama campaign or anybody else's campaign. I don't want the government collecting more information about me, and I especially don't want it done through my unsuspecting kids. Using our kids to push progressive agendas is despicable. Recall this story? The Los Angeles Unified School District will use a state grant to train teens to promote Obamacare to family members. Covered California, the state's health insurance exchange announced grants of $37 million to promote the nationally unpopular law. So, wait a minute, we're going to school to teach our kids to go home and promote a nationally unpopular law. We're using them to deliver the mechanism. This isn't right. And that's one of the potential problems that occurs with the data mining through Common Core. And by the way, Common Core understands that they're starting to take a beating from the public right now. So they've changed the name of their most recent product to, quote, Next Generation Science Standards. Now, it doesn't say Common Core, but it's still the same thing. We have a saying in Texas that you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. Well, they dropped the name Common Core from the new science standards, but that's just their lipstick. So these are just a few of the problems with Common Core that have emerged in recent months, and there are certainly many others as well. And we'll keep you updated in coming programs, but today we're going to visit with some Common Core warriors who are standing tall for all of us. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back. Did you know that today the most powerful force in shaping education, philosophy, and knowledge is testing? Testing drives everything about education. Let me explain. I've been officially appointed in numerous states to help write their social studies standards. Well, a few years back when we did the last set of standards in Texas, an interesting discussion arose. There were some 15 of us who did the standards, and we were praised for producing such a great set of standards, but I pointed out that, good standards don't ensure good content in the textbooks. I've often seen textbook publishers go in the direction they want to go rather than the direction set forth in the standards that they're supposed to follow. Now, in my case, I'm also often asked by publishers to help write their textbooks, so I sometimes get 2 shots at making sure kids get good content. I get one with writing social studies standards and one with helping write the textbooks. But even that's not enough. Why? Because the test drives the entire process in education today. School funding and even teacher pay raises can be tied to student performance on tests. So teachers teach to the content of the test rather than the content either of the textbooks or the standards. So whoever writes the test ultimately determines what students will be taught and what they will learn. And there's something else you should know about educational testing. 2 decades ago, a number of standardized tests were used in schools across the nation. Some schools use the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, and others use the Stanford Achievement Test, and others use the California Achievement Test. And by the way, the California Achievement Test is the one we used in our school, and it was introduced back in the 1950s. Now, in the school in Texas where I was a principal, that California Achievement Test, we used it, and those tests, all those tests were used across the nation. So because of that, you could see how your students fared with students in other states. So one year, I don't know, North Dakota might be #1 in the nation, and maybe Nebraska was 12th, or I don't know, Mexico or Alabama or somebody was 40th or whatever. But comparing one state against another put too much pressure on educators and bureaucrats, and especially if their schools weren't the ones that were doing well. So to alleviate that pressure, states soon began making their own tests just for their students. That kept their states from being compared with other states. So the state who had been 47th or 49th or whatever no longer was. So having a test for each state removed the pressure for states to perform well when compared to other states. Now, additionally, tests are also regularly renormed, and especially when scores get too low. Often when a test is renormed, voila, school students are suddenly much smarter than what they were. Now, look at what happened with this national test. I've got, let's see, right here, or which way? Ah, there it is. See this test? You can see the scores on this test, and you can see how they had been high in 66, and then you see where they fell, and then they got low. Now look at the next point on the graph. Look what happens. That's where they renormed the test. Now you see at that renorming point, look what happened after they renormed the test. Boom, it's a skyrocket. Look how it shot through the roof. In only 1 year's time, students went from being the lowest they'd ever been on that test to being the highest in the history of the test. Now, how did kids get that smart in just 1 year? That's because they renormed the test. So that's what happens when you renorm. They can go through the roof, and that's the result of renorming. So once again, the pressure's off educators. When you renorm a test, everybody looks like they're doing great. Now, when I was a school principal, I tried an experiment once, and so I had our students take 2 separate versions of the same achievement test. I used the California Achievement Test, but with the norms from 1973, and I used the California Achievement Test with the norms of 1985. Now, generally, the kids usually got maybe 2 grade levels smarter or dumber, depending on which one of the 2 tests they took first. So the older the test, the more rigorous it was. Just as we saw earlier with the 1895 8th grade test and the 1862 4th grade test, renorming a test can often make test scores look better than what they really are. So in today's educational system, testing makes all the difference. Therefore, whoever writes a test and who determines what questions will be on the test has more influence on what happens in education than those who write the core standards or those who write the textbooks. Now, in the case of Common Core, not only do they have standards, but they've gone hand in glove with the academic assessment testing, and that's just one more of the many reasons that Common Core is not good for America. Now, here to talk with us about this, we've got a panel of folks. We've been busy all day, the last 2 days actually. We've been going over all sorts of Common Core things. So we got heroes here from states all over the country. We have legislators here. We have grassroots activists. We have communication specialists. And just looking over this, and one of the concerns that everybody's had has been over what happens with the academic assessment testing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let some of these experts tell you stories about what happens with this and let you see the concern that's out there. And this really is kind of vicarious for us as an audience. I mean, doesn't matter what district you live in, doesn't matter whether you have kids in school or not, this is what's happening in your district. It's what's happening in your schools. It's what's happening with Common Core. And this is why the assessment testing in Common Core is such a bad thing right now. All right, who wants to take the first shot? What's wrong with what's going to the Common Core?
Okay. My name is Orlene Kurla, and I'm the state president of Eagle Forum of California. I also started a group called Californians United Against Common Core, and we've just heard about the data collection. This is a very interesting book that has come out from the Federal Department of Education. It's their draft book, but it lets you know what they think lies in store for us. On page 44, it shows the interesting tools they're going to be using to test data collection as the children are taking their assessment tests. And for example, here it shows a wristband that will be on their wrist testing their pulse. Here is the little mouse they'll be holding while they're doing the assessment. That will give the stress level on the mouse. Even the chair they're sitting in will be testing their posture. And then it shows a picture of the camera that will be focused on their face through their computer, because all of this is done by computers, and that will be showing their facial expression. And you wonder why and what they're going to be using this data for. The assessment is really how they're going to be collecting the most data on our children. And this is right straight from the Federal Department of Education.
I'm just, maybe I'm not good at this. I don't quite understand what that kind of testing data has to do with what year the Civil War took place, or how to solve the following algebraic equation, or all those things we're supposed to learn in school. But that's part of what happens. So that's from the Federal Department of Education, and that's some of the things we might look forward to with testing that's happening. Okay, who else? Somebody else on testing.
Well, I'm Ellen Wheeler. I live in Utah, and I work with FreedomWorks. And as I got a chance to look more into all these assessments, what concerns me about how much they're going to assess my child is that they'll assign, based on not just how he tests, but how he takes the test, what his value is in society. And I don't want the government or businesses to assign his value.
What do you mean what their value is?
Well, I think that the government will look at, does he get stressed when he takes a test on history? If he does, then he's not valuable as a history teacher. Even if he loves history, they will assign that he doesn't have a value at that place. And I don't want the government deciding that. In America, to me, my son decides what's valuable to him and how he wants to perceive his own importance in that value. I don't want his value to be determined by the government or a big business or anyone else.
That used to be one of our inalienable rights, the right to choose your career and your living in your profession. And so the assessment testing will say, no, this kid's no good in this area. And you know what? We have lots of historical examples of kids who did really lousy on tests who turned out to be really good in that area. Suddenly the light went on. But if the government's going to say, oh, you can't go into that area, that's not good stuff. Gail, tell me about the ACT.
Well, it's really interesting.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Gail Rosica, and I am the Eagle Forum president in Utah. And we think of ACT as our college entrance test. A lot of us have taken it, our children have taken it, grandparents have taken them. But that's all changing now. ACT is now becoming one of the consortiums that will be giving tests in the schools. In fact, some of the schools are already using ACT down in the 8th grade. It's going to go down to early elementary school. In fact, if you look on their website, they say that. They say now ACT, they said it's their responsibility to monitor the children from early elementary school all the way through college and beyond. And well, what does that mean? Well, they also go on to say that it's critical that they collect this information on the children, and that because there's so much to collect, they said they're going to have to reframe their definition of college and career readiness. They go on to say, in fact, that they will have to, the new definition of college, that is there on their website, the new definition of college is anything that you learn after after you leave high school. So anything that you learn, if you are a construction worker and you're learning to be a construction, that is the new college. And then it says why? Well, it says why because of the need for workforce training. So as you leave college, high school, and you are now in college, whatever it is that you do.
So they again have to determine the path that you're going to take in your work and your profession.
Starting in elementary school, they will, through workforce training, they'll track them in paths to whatever direction they think that child needs to go.
So if they want you to be an airplane pilot, or if they want you to be a ditch digger or whatever, they start with that information, that data mining that goes back in elementary school.
And they take you in that direction.
We'll take a break. We'll be back right after this to look at some more on Common Core.
The Blaze.
All right, we're back. Well, looking at what was happening with assessment testing, let's pick up right there again and go back into some more of it, because there's still a lot out there. So who wants to address another? Kelly. Senator Kelly Ward, Arizona.
I am Dr. Kelly Ward. I'm state senator from Arizona, and some of the things that concern me are the expense of this to our hardworking taxpayers in all of our states, because it's going to be much more expensive, and also their unproven tests. They're aligned with the Common Core, but these tests haven't been finished yet, and we don't know how they're going to affect our students. We don't know about the outcomes that we're going to get, and we're going to allow the federal government to come in with a massive overreach into our states and take something that's actually a state's right and take that over, and I just don't think that's right.
So the state's right, and you mentioned testing. What was the cost of the test in California? We were talking earlier.
It was, right now we have the STAR test, which is $13 per student. With the assessment, it will be $200 per student. Comes out to be $1.2 billion for the entire state.
So you go from 13 a student to 200 per student, and of course you know who's going to pay for that. It's we, the parents, and the taxpayers, and everybody else. So there are costs associated with it. Randy.
Randy Osborne, and I'm a lobbyist for Florida Eagle Forum. Also, I'm director of education for Heartland Institute. A couple things that I have noticed in the assessments. And first of all, those assessments are coming down from the federal government. That's one of the concerns that we have. But according to the U.S. Department of Education, within the assessments, the intention is to not only test for academics, but they're to also test for mindsets, things.
Oh my gosh!
Interpersonal and intrapersonal.
Do they define that? What's mindset?
Well, it's up to them to make that decision of what mindsets are, and that's what I'm concerned about. So
they're going to test minds. Do they say how they do that?
Well, they don't, but in one of the documents in the tenacity document from the Department of Education, I think we have a pretty clear understanding of how they're going to be doing that.
So how are they going to do that?
Well, one of them is with biometric data. The other one that we're concerned about is the philosophical questions that they'll ask. And that's another thing that we're concerned about. For example, my daughter, she just took the ACT test a few months ago, and she came home and she said, "Dad, this thing was laced with assumptive language." And I started asking her what that meant, and she went into detail about the philosophical assumptions that the tests were making that had no basis of fundamental fact at all.
You know, that assumptive, we had a textbook here in Texas one time that came in, and in the textbook they told the kids that the best form of government that's ever existed in the history of mankind was communism. Now, Texas, come on, we know better than that, but that was in one of the textbooks that was out there. And the problem with that is, I don't care what all the other textbooks say, that one textbook, if that becomes the question they use on the test, guess what every teacher in the state is going to be teaching? Communism is the best form of government ever seen by mankind. And that's the difficulty with testing, is if it's tied to a philosophy, and Common Core certainly has a left-leaning philosophy inculcated, and you start testing over that, guess what everybody's going to start teaching? I mean, it changes the whole complexion of education. Sally, go ahead.
I'm Sally Kern, a state representative from Oklahoma, and taught school for close to 20 years. And a saying that I heard over and over again is you test what you treasure. You treasure what you test. And so going back to what he was saying a while ago is, you know, we don't really know what they're going to be asking because there's so much secrecy. There's no transparency with these assessments. And so that goes back to what you mentioned a while ago. Who's writing these tests? Yeah. And I think that that's a real problem with the assessments.
We know that Coleman is with the College Board with SAT, and we certainly know that he thought Obama was the greatest thing that's happened. So I can kind of guess what philosophy might come through with him, but that's speculation. Right. Who else?
Deborah Lamb from Montana. With Montanans Against Common Core. We're a grassroots organization, and I've had meetings across the state, and in one of the meetings where we had a bunch of teachers, I questioned the Common Core teacher coach about the assessments and how will parents have an idea of what the kids are being tested on, and how will they as a teacher? And she said, well, we won't, because 98% of all of our students year one are going to be tested on a computer, and each student will have a different question. And then based on their answer, they will have a different follow-up question. So how will we have any clue as to what is on there or how they're really performing?
Wow.
And who's making the judgment?
And so the teachers themselves will not see that information?
That's what she said.
Well, we've been hearing that this thing keeps getting run from the federal side down, and that would certainly say it's not local control, it's not parental control, and both of those are bad things.
I'm Kelly Coles, and I'm the president of Springboro School Board in Ohio and the president of the Ohio School Board Leadership Council. Currently, when parents come to us and they may have a complaint about curriculum, they bring that to the attention of the school board. The school board can go to the curriculum director and say, should we address this? Can we address this? This is of concern to our school district. If the test is not something that we can guide either at the local level or the state level, then I could imagine that the curriculum director would simply say it's what's on the test. And do you want our students to fail that exam question? So the control is completely out of our hands once the test is completely out of our hands.
Now, here's a question for me. If we're going to use that kind of a wide scope test that 45 states have agreed to at this point, then what happens for those 5 states that don't agree with that philosophy? What happens to them on the test? And if you happen to be a private school, parochial school, homeschool, and you don't teach the philosophy of Common Core, then what happens on testing? Anybody want to?
Well, first of all, they're all being told that the ACT, all of these college entrance board exams are being aligned to Common Core. So that motivates all of the private schools and the homeschool parents to think, wow, I've got to teach this or my children will not pass those tests. Even the GED, the high school equivalency test, is going to be aligned. I also wanted to mention this is the book that comes from California, moving us towards the California assessment system. It says in here that one of the reasons it's going to be so much more expensive is that 30% are going to be essays and projects that can only be graded by private people. So, of course, that makes it so much more expensive. And in this book I wrote about it, I quote newspaper articles that say it's going to be open-ended questions that have to be written by essays. And, of course, these open-ended questions are so easily led to leftist philosophies, and that's a big concern.
Well, I'll tell you one of the concerns for me. I vividly remember in my mind, because I went to college on a math and science scholarship. I did not like English language stuff, and part of the reason I didn't was reaffirmed while I was at college, because my freshman English class I had to write a research paper, an essay, and I did. And the teacher gave me a D- on the essay. The second semester I had a different teacher in the English course, and I just used the same paper the second semester that I'd written because I got a different teacher. I got an A- on it the second semester. I didn't change a word in the paper, and this teacher says that looks like a D- to me, and that one gets an A-. That's the problem when you have open-ended testing. It becomes subjective on the philosophy of whoever's grading the test, as opposed to, you know, solve this equation or solve this formula. It's a real problem. So what we've got is a little bit of testing. When we come back, we're going to see about what we can do at the state level from some legislators who can give us guidance on what we as citizens and as parents can do to make a difference in getting this Common Core train slowed down and derailed. Common Core. Been talking about Common Core, and we're just finishing up with some of the assessment things. And assessment wasn't a big issue 3 months ago like it is becoming now. And so, as I mentioned at the head of the program, that's one of the things we're going to do is keep up with what's happening in Common Core, let you know about new things as they come down. But you've heard some things today, and you say, man, what do we do to fix this or stop it? Or how do we touch the legislators? Or what do they want us to do? What can we do? And I'll tell you, it happens at the local level. Don't worry about fixing this at the Federal Department of Education. You fix your local school board. You fix your state, your legislators. That's where you focus. So, legislators, who wants to give us some guidance?
Andy Thompson, State Representative from Ohio, and I have a bill, House Bill 237, to stop Common Core in Ohio. And it's really in response to a groundswell of concern that parents and school board officials and teachers have brought to me. This is the long arm of the federal government reaching in and trying to dictate to people, trying to assess our kids, really putting our kids and our parents and our teachers at risk because we count on them at the local level to try to get things right. And this is really subverting that process. And the process by which we got to Common Core is a whole other story, perhaps for another show. But it was really not very judicious. It was not very thought out. We didn't have a...
Now, how long have you guys been in Common Core?
We got in through Race to the Top.
Yeah, okay.
2010, we were part of that competition, and we took the Race to the Top money, and that really, as part of our application, we agreed to adopt the Common Core state standards, and so,
which is a federal Race to the Top is a federal program.
Yes.
So federal dollars got you into Common Core,
right.
And so now, how will your bill get you out? What's it do?
Really, we're going to stop the implementation of this state standards. We're going to halt any money that's going toward this. We're going to stop any assessments related to the Common Core, whether it's Park or Smarter Balance. And fundamentally, we're going to ask the state school board to be more accountable because if you realize back in 2000, they got the authority to do this all by themselves. I think the citizens of Ohio are very concerned about how we got to where we are, and my bill will help us get back out of it.
So you started it because you started hearing from constituents who talked to you.
Probably 6 months ago, and I found out that my fellow legislators knew very little about this. And, we're accountable for education in our state. If something goes dreadfully wrong, they don't point at the state's school board. They're going to point at us.
Yeah.
And I think that's really why legislators, as they learn more about it, they share the same concern. Parents, but it has to be a grassroots response. And I think that there's a groundswell building, and I think that we're going to be hearing more about it, and we're going to just getting ready to have hearings probably in September.
Good. Sally?
David, as lawmakers, what we do is we pass laws. And Common Core, a big problem I have with it is it's unconstitutional. You look at the Constitution, there's nothing in there that gives the federal government the authority to centralize education. Now, I have a plaque on my in my office by George Washington that says the Constitution is the guide from which I will never depart. And I think we're in a sad state today when so many, even lawmakers, we don't even pay attention to the Constitution. And if we continue to do this, our society will not, we just can't continue. The Constitution is the platform, if you will, or the path that we are supposed to go follow so that we can have a society that's rule of law rather than rule of man. And I think it's a dangerous situation we're in because education is the tool that our future society is trained through.
Yeah.
And we need to be really careful what we do instead of just, like we did, 46 states jumping on the bandwagon before anything was ever written. That's a real problem.
That is amazing that everybody agreed to it before the standards had been written. Kelly?
Well, I think that the people in my state and throughout the country are starting to wake up. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see voters in my area getting involved with the local school boards and coming out against Common Core and against nationalization of our education system. And I think that that's really important for people everywhere to start to do, to get involved. One of the things that people in my area are very upset about is one of our textbooks describes America as a democracy rather than a constitutional republic. And that inflames them, and it inflames me as well. And that subtle manipulation of the language is how our kids start to be indoctrinated, and that's what people are worried about, and that's what we have to fight against with
I will
Common
tell you,
Core.
Elections do have consequences. In Texas, we finally got a majority of conservatives on the State Board of Education here. We elect that position. And in our newest textbooks in Texas, the State Board of Education took the position that we will not fund any textbook in Texas that describes America as a democracy. I mean, we've just cut off funds for that. If you don't say we're a constitutional republic as required by the Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, you're just not going to get funded in Texas. And that's why elections do have difference, and that's why getting guys like you in office make a big difference. Who else? Anybody else on things that need to be done from a legislative side to help? Now, there's Sally, you're in Oklahoma. Your battleground state this next time coming up. You guys will try to do something on Common Core. Andy, same with you in Ohio. You guys are very active. Kelly, Arizona, same thing? Yes. So all states, I think there's 11 states that I know of that this is a major battleground issue that's going to happen. We got a lot of great groups here. We got Freedom Works. We got lots of Eagle Forum. Kyle and Emmett, you guys have got national groups. There's all sorts of groups that help you get plugged into this stuff at the state level. And again, this is not going to be fixed from the federal level down. It's fixed from the local level up. So find these guys here. There's a lot that you can look at, but do encourage you to start educating your state legislator. If your state legislator doesn't know much about this, and you know, Andy gave a great example of how it was people who came to him and got him up to speed on this, start doing that. Build relationships. Don't go mad and angry and yelling. Go in and build relationships. Say, hey, did you know? Have you seen this? Did you know what this is? Do you know what it does in our state? Go at that relational level. Before we go to break, any of the legislators, any final guidance you want to give the country on how to go at doing this? Man, a quiet group. Kelly?
I mean, my advice, at least in our state, we're going to try just to defund it. Just like defund Obamacare, defund Common Core.
All right, so defunding it. And you guys are working on defunding as well? By the way, is there a good mechanism for states to get out other than just saying, if you say, I'm going to defund this in my state, what do you do with all the federal funds you've already accepted? Is there anything to that?
Very likely we'll go back. In some cases, that's a decision that they're trying to make legally to see whether the money stays or whether it goes back. But it's through the money that the federal government has grown and it's gained influence, and that's really a concern here. And it's not just Common Core; it's through other grants that they're providing, either for the assessments or other things. So there's many pernicious ways through government funding that they get a role that they shouldn't have constitutionally.
The funding is the big thing. So, Sally, how are you guys going at it in Oklahoma after funding?
Well, we are looking at funding, yes.
Okay, and that's what's happened in Indiana already, and that's what's happened in Michigan and other places where they put it on hold. So that is an effective way to go at it then. Is that what we're saying? Okay, good. Well, we'll be back right after this break, and we'll wrap up Common Core and leave you some thoughts about what you can do.
Truth lives here.
So Common Core. I want to close out tonight with a story from Kelly, school board president from Ohio that we talked about. Kelly, tell us the story.
Well, this summer, my daughter came to me, and she's 16, and she's in an AP history class, and she was on page 20 of an assigned reading for the summer of a 700-page book. And she told me that, Mom, this is really just a very disturbing book, and I'm having nightmares, and it's really making me feel bad about myself, about, our country. And I looked at it, and I started reading through parts of it. I would just kind of intermittently look at a page, and I thought, what is this? It was horrible. It just referred to Christians in a kind of rather mean, condescending way. It talked about the military in a negative way. Capitalists were crocodiles, and just went on, 700 pages. And I did look it up, and it was a Howard Zinn book. It was a required book. I think Common Core will make this kind of reading just in particular, but I refused to make her read it. And I can do that at the local level, and I'm worried we can't refuse at the higher level.
But that's what we need to do. Stand up to the local level, stand up, contact your legislators, stand up. Common Core, lots on the Blaze you can look at to get the information you need to make a difference in your community. Protect your kids from this stuff. Let them have a rigorous academic education. Get them good books. Good night from Dallas.